This recording will cover Chapter 1 in your textbook, Methods and Strategies for Teaching Students with High Incidence Disabilities. So we're going to start off in Chapter 1, talking about providing special education to students with high incidence disabilities. Okay, so there are the objectives for the chapter. Hopefully you'll be able to understand what high incidence disabilities are. They are also called HI, right? Short for high incidence. So if you see capital H, capital I, just know that that is referring to high incidence disabilities. Okay, so we're going to talk about some practical descriptions of high incidence disabilities. So what does that actually mean? What are considered high incidence disabilities? All of those kinds of things. Let me just try to move this little box a little bit. Okay, so we're going to talk about specific learning disability, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, autism, mild intellectual disability, and emotional and behavioral disorders. In thinking about EBD, emotional behavioral disorders, you will learn that there are a lot of abbreviations, acronyms, all sorts of things in special education. So try to keep them straight. Specific learning disabilities, also called SLD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, as I just said, is ADHD. Autism, mild intellectual disability, some people call this ID for intellectual disability, and then EBD. So thinking about we'll talk about what emotional and behavioral disabilities looks like, how it's experienced, some cognitive processing difficulties. I apparently am having problems with my words today, academic skill difficulties, and social skill difficulties. Okay, so specific learning disabilities, thinking about, there's kind of an unexpected underachievement is how it used to be described. So kind of this unexpected failure to learn. So a student in the past, the main way to identify students with learning disabilities was through the IQ discrepancy model or aptitude achievement discrepancy. Okay, so thinking, well, this student has an average IQ, so you would expect them to perform in the average range, right? Reading, math, written comprehension, written expression, whatever. But for some reason, they're not, right? Maybe you have a fourth grader who has an average IQ, so you would expect them to be on about a fourth grade level, right? For reading, let's just say. But for some reason, they are reading at a first grade level or an early second grade level. So that's that aptitude achievement, also, an unexpected failure to learn, or looking at significant limitations in acquiring and or expressing information. You can see learning disabilities in reading. Of course, that is our primary area where you'll see learning disabilities, and we will cover all of this in another course, but it is considered learning disabilities and autism are in this same textbook. I think I said in the syllabus review video that it goes back and forth. Autism sometimes is a high incidence disability, sometimes it's not a high incidence disability. So for our purposes, because I really like this textbook, I like some of the activities that are in the textbook, I thought it was very user friendly, I went for this textbook. Okay, so we're going to talk about specific learning disabilities, EBD, ADHD, autism. We're going to cover a lot, but our activities and our assignments will primarily focus on autism. Okay, there are also SLDs, specific learning disabilities in math and written expression. Again, typically they're diagnosed in reading, but there are other areas where a student could have a specific learning disability. Again, that lower academic achievement, they might have poor organization or poor organizational skills. They might just appear to be kind of messy, but that's not really it. They just have difficulties with organization, executive control. They might have some social skills deficits, right? Especially as students get older, they know that they can't read as well as their peers. So that might cause them to act out. It might cause them to, be bullied, unfortunately, not have many friends. So there's a whole bunch going on. ADHD, again, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. ADHD, there are a couple different types, primarily or predominantly inattentive. So that's where students have difficulty initiating attention, sustaining attention. They seem to kind of be, off in their own little world, is the inattentive type. And then there's also predominantly hyper-impulsive, or, that hyperactive type. Limited behavior inhibition, so kind of means, well, they'll just go ahead and do anything, right? And a high level of activity. You've probably seen students like this who are out of their seats, who are fidgeting, who have to be constantly moving. Then there's also the ADHD combined type, which is less prevalent than the predominantly inattentive or the predominantly hyper-impulsive. Okay, so here's just some practical descriptions of the high incidence disabilities. So ADHD at different age levels. Okay, so preschool, here are some characteristics, elementary, middle school, and middle or high school. So just kind of notice how those characteristics or those descriptions differ as students get older. So then thinking about ADHD still, again, disorganization. So they might come in with a messy backpack. Their desks might be a disaster, right? You might be like cluttered, like I'm cluttered. I'm going to admit it. I'm cluttered, but it's organized clutter and I can find things. Students with ADHD, they couldn't find a pen in their bag because they have no idea where it has gone in that black hole of a backpack, right? So also poor time awareness, poor time management. They just don't know that you have 30 minutes to complete this project or whatever. They might not really understand what 30 minutes is. And they might say, oh, I can talk to my friends for 25 minutes and then I'll be able to finish it in 5 minutes. Well, we all know that's probably not the case. Limited attention, again, lower academic achievement. This academic achievement is not necessarily because they're not as, and I'm putting this word in quotes, as smart as their peer, but they tend to just miss information, like MISS. They miss that information, right? So because they're paying attention to whatever over here, or the tag in their shirt, or the this, or the this, and they're missing that academic information. So again, it could lead to frustration and or some social difficulties. All right, autism. Now it is referred to as autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. Again, more letters, you're welcome. It's very much alphabet soup in special education. So autism spectrum disorder is a persistent impairment in reciprocal social communication, that back and forth communication, and social interaction, right? Interacting with others, and very restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. When I taught children with autism in Charleston, and that used to be the term, children with autism. Now, a lot of individuals with autism prefer to go by autistic individuals. So that is something that also goes back and forth. A, is autism a high incidence disability or not? And B, do we say children with autism or do we say autistic individuals? I've seen it both ways within, the same month. So I'm going to try to remember. I was taught person first, so kind of saying a person with autism. But now a lot of individuals, and it's a specific, I would say, to autism. This is where I kind of see it most prominently. I see individuals who want to focus on identity first. So they want to be called autistic individuals. So if you're working with older students, ask them, with younger students, follow what the guardians, what the caretakers do, what everybody else at the school does, because I don't have a definite answer for you. But anyways, when I used to teach children with autism, I know I'm probably going to go back and forth, and I'm not going to mean to, but that's how I am. I had one student who was very focused on weather and hurricanes, and so his motivation was going on weather.com for 5 or 10 minutes. He was, 9 or 10 when I worked with him. He could tell me any hurricane that had happened in the past 6 years, not just in Florida. I lived in Florida at the time. I think I said Charleston, but I lied. I was in the Florida Keys at the time. He could tell me any 6 hurricanes that had happened, all the named hurricanes for the past 6 years and for the upcoming 6 years. So he was very focused on that, right? It was his repetitive pattern of interest that he would do anything for the Weather Channel or weather.com. Okay, so ASD classification order, and this kind of I'll get to this in a second, the bottom part. So there's Asperger's syndrome, which was under ASD, then it wasn't, now it is. So again, it's all kind of goes back and forth. Autism, PDD, NOS, this one isn't really used so much anymore. Rett syndrome and disintegrative disorder. Those are not the most common terms anymore. Okay, this textbook was from 2019, and even since then, terms and labels have changed. Okay, now we look more at the levels of support that autistic individuals might need. Level 1 is kind of that mild level of support, right? They're pretty independent. They can be pretty much included in gen ed classrooms, stuff like that. Level 2 is a little more moderate. They might need some more moderate levels of support. And level 3 is what in the past was called kind of that severe, or more support. This is, so level 1 is the least amount of support from a teacher, from a paraprofessional, from a speech language pathologist. Okay, level 3 is the most level of support, or the highest amount of support. Okay, so that is something to be aware of. Level 1, level 2, level 3, those levels of support for our autistic kiddos. Some other challenges, academic challenges faced by students with autism. Sometimes they might be disfluent in their reading skills. They might be able to read just fine, but they might get focused on 1 or 2 words, or kind of saying the same phrase over and over again. So I was listening to a book on Libby today, and for one section, it repeated like 3 times. And I was like, what just happened? They just said that. So that could be an autistic student might say something like that, accounting for what an audience needs to be told, right? They might kind of say that and focus and get stuck on, or repeat that one section or that one sentence or something like that. They also might have difficulty with reading comprehension, difficulty organizing, writing, and written information. They need to think about what an audience needs to be told. Does the audience need the whole entire story of what happened on your walk to school today? No, not really. If the most important part was that you saw a dog and a cat walking across the street together, well, that's the part you want to get across. Do I need to know what color the car that drove by you at 7:27 in the morning was? No, not really. Unless it had something to do with the story. I don't really need to know that. So we need to help our autistic individuals learn what needs to be told. They might also have the same type of sentence structure. I went to the park. I saw a dog. I saw a cat, right? Very repetitive. So they're not very varied with their sentence structure or vocabulary. They also, of course, might have some fine motor skills, some graphomotor, kind of writing, math problem solving, and abstract and logical thinking. Autistic individuals also struggle with, and I might be getting ahead of myself, they struggle with what are those words? Like idioms, like, oh, you're a smart cookie, or zipper your lips. They might try to actually zip their lips closed. So just be mindful of that. Also, some social challenges faced by students with autism. They might speak in monotones. They might be repetitive. Students or other peers might lose interest. They might not want to be around someone who just says the same thing. Or, this one student I had who liked to talk about weather. That's all he liked to talk about. So, I could handle it, but a 10-year-old, they don't really want to talk about Weather Channel or weather.com or hurricanes all day long. So autistic individuals also might fail to observe traditional conventions of that back and forth communication. They might just start talking and not stop to listen, or not stop to ask questions of their peers or whoever they're conversing with. A lot of autistic individuals don't make eye contact. That's very uncomfortable for them. And that pragmatics, kind of just that real practical language that we understand and don't think twice about, but an autistic individual will struggle with that. I think I'm going to do this one slide real quick. Nope. So this, goodness gracious. All right, I'm going to stop here for the end of part 1 of chapter 1. So come back and we will finish up chapter 1. I'm at a 15-minute time limit, which is real fast for me. So come on back and we will pick up right at the end of, this slide.